So for my part, I will going to continue the introduction about Ferdinand de Saussure. So in 1857, Ferdinand de Saussure was born in Geneva, Switzerland. So he was interested in English languages even at his very early age. So at the age of 15, he learned, aside from English, he learned French and Greek and Latin. He also wrote essays on languages at the age, having been influenced by a family of scientists. Also, he entered the University of Geneva and studied natural sciences. He stayed at the university, but he had convinced his parents to permit him to study linguistics in Leipzig in 1876 and luckily received his doctorate. So from the University of Geneva, he transferred to Leipzig in 1876 to study linguistics. So now let's discuss about the contribution to linguistics of Ferdinand de Saussure. So as a linguist, he was among the pillars of linguistics in 20th century. And also, he is known as a co-founder of semiotics and structuralism. So, structuralism theorizes that things could not be considered or understood without analyzing the context where they appear. Also, things might look self-evident at first glance, but structuralism goes beyond what one sees and insists that context contributes to the meaning-making process. Now, let's discuss what is structuralism. So, it was also said there that Saussure is also known as a co-founder of semiotics and structuralism. Now, let us talk about semiotics. So, in simply definition, semiotic is the systematic study of signs and symbols, wherein it involves signs, wherein the sign has something to convey, or it communicates something, and usually it has a deeper meaning. Now let's go back to structuralism. To fully understood structuralism, so Saussure frames a linguistic structure and finds a system, mechanism, or structure in which language works. It was also being said here that he claimed that the sign was a combination of a signifier, signified, the mental concept of idea, and a signifier. So now let's dig deeper the explanation or the definition of this following term. So the term sign is frequently used by people studying communication theory to characterize the way in which meaning is communicated symbolically, so via certain objects within individual cultures. Thus, the cross operates as a sign within Christian culture. So, Saussure is closely associated with the concept of linguistic sign. He argued that words comprise of two elements, a sound image, a pronunciation form or signifier, and a meaning or sense. So, sense, which is termed as the signified. So, to use an example himself, Saussure used the word tree, which is made up of sound image or signifier, like the tri, and the sense or signified indicating treeness. So the relation between them is conventional but not a natural one, Why? Because there is no reason why society calls it as a tree. So why society shouldn't use any other sequence of sounds to represent treeness if it's so. So the signifier here then acts as a label, but for a concept, not an actual object. It is the signifier and signified together. So it is said there that not only the signifier, though it acts as a label, but not the actual object. So it is the signifier and the signified. So to complete the word or sign which is used by us as a speakers of the language to refer to actual trees. That is why it is not TRI, which is tree, but tree, TREE. So here we have another example which is on the table. So on the table there is a column of sign, signifier, and signified. Now in the column of the sign, which is we have the rose. Then the signifier is we have a picture of a rose, which it means that the thing that gives meanings, including word or image. Now in signified, it means that it is passion. Then it explains here that the mental association or concept that the sign represents. That's why in a signifier it is the object that we can see, and where in the signified it has a other meaning, which is passion. Now it is being explained that in signifier, the thing that gives meaning including word or image, while the signified, it is the mental association or concept that the sign represents. So to further understood, there are three similar concepts that is under structuralism, which Saussure advocate. So he also maintained the difference between langue, which means a set of conventions and rights, and parole, which means language as used in daily life. He claimed that the sign was a combination of a signified, the metal concept or idea, and a signifier. The physical existence including sounds and image. Then there was no intrinsic and particular reason why a sign was utilized to express a signifier. So there was no resemblance and direct connection between the language and the thing that it represents. That's why other languages call it using different names. And lastly, the meaning of signs can be based on their relationships and differences from other signs. That is according to Nagy 2020. Moreover, it is said here also that Saussure maintained the difference between langue, which means a set of conventions and rights, and parole, which means language as used in daily life. Now let's discuss the meaning of langue and parole, which how these two differs from each other. Now, Saussure introduced langue in these two terms to distinguish the sense of the word. So, language refers to the language system shared by native speakers of a language. So, in other words, langue means the abstract knowledge of the language, which Saussure feels is known by the social group of particular language community. So, he also stated here that langue is similar to Chomsky's term competence, where the definition of competence here refers to the abstract knowledge of the native speaker about the language. So in this idea of Chomsky, the native speakers knows that the rule of the language. Now in parole, it is said here that parole refers to the actual use of language by the speaker of a particular social group. So going back to the meaning of the language, it means the abstract knowledge of the language, while in parole is the actual usage of language. So in some respects similar to Chomsky term performance. Now sa langue is similar to Chomsky's term competence, while the parole is similar to Chomsky's term, which is performance. So this refers to the actual use of language by native speaker, and parole is dependent on language as performance is dependent on competence. But in parole, they specified that the user's linguistic behavior and what they do with language, whereas Chomsky's performance specifies the individual's use of language.